Good morning, everyone. So yeah, technical facilitator was a word that today was mentioned several times because it was a key role and also a new role in this project. And since the very beginning, it's been a central idea in the project. My colleague Fabrizio Neto, another technical facilitator, was explaining this morning the experience of all technical facilitators within the project. In today's workshop, I would like to focus more on what we actually did, on our experiences, thus also giving you a few insights, 3 or 4 insights about how to improve this experience and whether it's worth it to repeat it and to make it better for our next editions in the future. So just to give you a general framework of Lombardy region, there are many protected areas with a EU Nature up 2000 coverage, which is quite important. It is also an industrialized and urbanized area with a huge infrastructure, which is why Life Justiria 2020 had to work hard on such a context of protected area where environmental connectivity and territorial fragmentation have a key role. So let's just remember how Life Justiria 2020 acted upon a protected area. And that was a very important aspect of the project. And among our goals, there's governance and the protection of natural habitats and species, and an increase of contributions to improve knowledge and skills for protected areas of Natura 2000, as well as everything outside this world, which is as relevant or even more relevant. And that's where the technical facilitator comes in action. So this is what really distinguished what we've done since the beginning of the project. We basically proposed an ambitious project from the point of view of timelines. 8 years is a pretty strict deadline. It was funded by the European Union, and it was the first project in Italy for environmental protection with 17 billion euros invested. And during these last few years, we had to contribute with 100 million euros to deliver for biodiversity protection through so-called complementary funds. So just to better explain what I'm talking about, we've been saying it many times, but complementary funds basically means all those funds that were directly or indirectly delivered for biodiversity protection. And they can be entirely delivered or partially delivered to the goal because they can better contribute to these goals. So these funds can be very different. We have BSI, regional funds, national funds, private institutions funds. They must be used, and they can be used in the best possible way. That's where we had the idea of building a team of technical facilitators, people, experts of different areas, dealing with the use of such complementary funds, as well as the development of targeted actions for Life Justiria 2020 project. So stakeholders, networks between territories and authorities, stakeholder support, and research, collection, and use of such funding sources. These have been 8 intense years with many people who participated in the project, experts, actors, from different territories, different teams. So we collected in the last 8 years experiences and chances to basically focus on the best aspects of this project as well as what we could improve, because there is indeed some room for progress for our future editions. So we are at the end of the project and we can finally share some figures. So regarding our support, I would like to mainly refer to project building, drafting of projects that could be presented for tenders and then hopefully be approved for funding. So such biodiversity projects, such as Justicia 2020 that started in 2016 and it's going to end this year, the facilitation of this project reached the planned goals. The funds that we used were funds that we requested but weren't always approved. And we focused on different types of funds. So rural development funds, which was the main one, as well as regional funds, private funds, foundation funds, etc. More than 400 applications for a total of 50 million euros to deliver to biodiversity protection. Just to give you a general idea, not every project line reached the funding that they required, but most of them did, and this contributed to the main goals that we had. So that 100 million euro goal didn't have to necessarily be reached through technical facilitators. On one hand, we needed technical facilitators. On the other hand, we also needed experts to make the whole mechanism work independently. So let me underline our specific experiences through a few examples of what we did through some concrete projects. So there was a mixed regional and EU funding that allowed us to plan an improvement of amphibious protection. In that case, technical facilitators were able to present their application and then develop the project. For the same tender, there was a different topic for main intervention areas, which were a result of the Justicia 2020 project. Such protected areas had to be prioritized, especially for environmental connectivity. Now, going forward, I would like to focus on PSR. So for measure number 4, we worked to implement plans that could be efficient on territories that really needed them. For example, measure number 4, funding the improvement of wet areas and fountain areas. The PSR funding depended on the applications. So being able to act upon the territories that actually needed those fundings were what was our key goal. So we are talking about Natura 2000 areas that we really struggled to protect, involving farmers to access these fundings. Now, unfortunately, these opportunities are not always appealing to farmers, and that's not our fault, but we tried to involve them to reach and obtain these funds for areas that are really important for the Natura 2000 project. Another project involving PSR was developed through Measure 16 of PSR, thus with a series of interventions that included many different measures in just one project, in one territory. This is an example that I always share because it really shows you how joining different interests, even for an agricultural area, can be such a benefit. It was a win-win approach, thus basically focusing on farmers' interests to fund production interests and financial interests as well. Joining them with environmental and biodiversity related interventions. All of this was included in one project that had more chances to be funded because the final score was just higher. In that case, the Measure 16 project was huge and it was funded indeed. Now, just going forward about PSR, I would like to focus on our activity before the publication of the tenders, thus before the funding. So with Measure 4, and not only, also Measure 1 or Measure 7, we discussed and we communicated with management authorities of PSR to give some instructions about the needs of the territory. Since we had such an expert technical team working on the territory and developing plans for industrial areas, it was easier for us to receive their instructions about their needs and to include them where possible into our applications. So, for example, in this case, we included protection measures against damages from wild animals. And we did the same for many other different interventions. So to conclude, what we've been doing, what I really wanted to highlight with my presentation is that technical facilitators, sometimes successfully and sometimes not really, basically wanted to fill the gap between territories and authorities, which sometimes are very distant from each other, and which is why territories sometimes have their needs unmet. We've seen that with many actors that ended up being satisfied with this project. So we're really happy with it, and we believe it worked and it contributed to an improvement of all areas, of course, with pros and cons and with lessons learned, lessons that will lead to a further improvement of the service. Let me close with this final slide, which presents some highlights for future discussions. First of all, farmers. What I really want to underline is the agricultural sector is intertwined with biodiversity, whether we like it or not. So in a territory where intensive agriculture is part of our financial tissue, we don't have to describe it. We know this very well, especially in Lombardy region, and farmers must be involved. So rather than having a cooperation relationship, we often have conflicts with these farmers. I'm not going to mention whose fault it is, whether it's naturalists or farmers themselves. The point is, farmers need to be involved. They are important actors and they are managing these territories. Now, Natura 2000 areas, all areas are important, but we have many territories that are being excluded. Now, with complementary funds, we would like to include these areas that have been excluded in the past. So at this point, here comes my final question. Can we make this experience a grounded approach? Can we replicate it? So I'm just wondering about replicability, whether we can use this experience to improve something in the light of the experience we've had this time. And maybe we can even invent something new that could be useful in the future. So thank you for your attention. Here are my contacts in the last slide. I just have 30 more seconds. Since I'm a facilitator, I would like to facilitate one more thing. At the back of the room, there are some posters and cardboards showing an app that was developed with some high school students I've been working with. It's called Guardami, which means look at me. And that's because biodiversity is not something that only adults deal with and not only politicians or scientists. Biodiversity can also be managed by anyone. So with this app that we developed with high school students, we would like to get anyone living in the city closer to these goals. So if you want to check it out, thank you.